Hey guys, this is John. I'm playing HomerSimpson in the 15-minute pool on ICC. So this player's 2048, and they open with knight f3. I'll play d5 in reply. My usual stuff. Mr. HomerSimpson. No doubt he's just ate a donut in that avatar picture. So he plays c4. I'll just play c6 and defend the pawn. In addition to c6, black could also play e6 or d4. Taking on c4 is not advised because white can regain the pawn pretty simply. So, okay, I'll play knight f6. They usually go bishop g2, and he'll play to gambit this pawn on c4, most likely. I usually take it in this spot. It's possible to play bishop f5 or bishop g4, or moves like g6 as well are fine. But I usually prefer just to capture, so I'll do that. And the line I typically play here is solid, albeit a line that is difficult for black to win with if white is determined. So now I usually play knight bd7, just trying to think if there's any reason to play something else. Nah, let's just play the usual stuff. And right around here, white wants to try to regain the pawn. And they can do that by playing queen c2 or knight a3, both attacking c4. If queen c2, knight b6, white has the option of playing a4, trying to chase my knight from b6. Sometimes they just play knight a3 directly, though. Okay, so they do insert a4, and I'll respond to a5, just putting a stop to a5. Yep, knight a3. Now I like this move, g6. Fianchettoing the bishop. So in doing a fianchetto on the king side, you leave open the option of bringing up the light square bishop to e6. So after knight takes c4, knight takes c4, I can play this move and attack their queen. I haven't pushed the pawn to like e6, for instance, which would block me from developing this light square bishop. And this same position could be reached without the insertion of the a-pawn moves. So white's pawn back on a2, black's pawn back on a7. I think I prefer it this way, honestly, because the b4 square is weak, and black can often make use of that in the middle game. Whereas if the pawn's on a2, they can always play a3 and dispute that b4 square. Okay, so he plays the immediate e4. Probably looking to follow up with d4 if I had to venture a guess. This stops me from playing knight d5. I could play bishop g4 right now if I want, so that if d4 I can take on f3 and maybe queen takes d4. It seems a little artificial, though, playing bishop g4. But if I castle, say, I wonder if they can go knight g5, and this bishop just lacks some decent squares to go to. So bishop g4 is probably not a bad move. I can play h6 if I want to stop knight g5. Not sure it's great to play h6 that early, though. What else could I do? Maybe queen b6. Trying to utilize the b3 square. Might not be so bad. So queen b6, let's say d4. I could castle or maybe continue with bishop b3. Okay, let's try queen b6. I just don't want to reach a position where white has e4 and d4 in and I have nothing to show for it. I'd like to probe their position a bit, maybe utilize that b3 square. So if he's going to stop me from playing knight d5 into b4, I need to search for active counterplay. I looked up my opponent's stats. He has a peak 15-minute rating of 2203, over 1,200 15-minute games played. Pretty good ratings in other categories, too. Looks like a solid 2,000 to 2,300 player in other rating categories. I've been doing well in the 15-minute games. My rating has gradually been creeping up. I'm getting a lot of low-rated opponents and winning like 1 or 2 points per game. Nothing substantial. So a loss would hurt. That would like plummet my rating against virtually anyone I can play, because I think I'm number 1 in the 15-minute category right now by a good like 60 or 70 points or something. So d4, I can try to play my bishop or queen into b3 right away. If bishop b3, looking to deflect the queen so I can play knight takes e4, I think they'll just play like queen d3 or queen b1 though, so maybe I should keep that move in reserve. I think I'm going to castle. And if bishop e3, maybe knight g4, looking to attack that dark square bishop. Yeah, this should be all right. So white has a nice center, but we have a rock-solid position. Our pawn structure is okay. Not too many weaknesses. And chances for counterplay. Developing the dark square bishop would be normal now, but I wouldn't be surprised if he played a move like h3 to take control over the g4 square, so we can follow with bishop e3 without having to worry about knight g4. So that would be probably a good prophylactic measure. And if he plays that move, what am I going to do? Maybe bishop b3 might be the right time for that move. Maybe rook f d8, wait one more move, but probably bishop b3. I think that would be the best way of using that square. I had another game in this line against Grandmaster Josh Friedel, where after the queen was attacked on c4, he played queen from c4 over to h4. And that was interesting. Or wait, is that the game I'm thinking of? Maybe not. Friedel might have retreated the queen to c2. I'll try to post that game if I remember to after I upload this video. But I have played this line OTB. And more often I see the version without the a-pawn moves. So again, with white's pawn on a2, black's pawn on a7. It seems like most white players kind of know that they shouldn't weaken b4 like that. And this particular line is well suited for counterplay for black if they do weaken that square. The thing I recall in the Friedel game, because it's been a couple years, is that I was a little bit worse, but I don't think at any point in the game was I ever significantly worse. It was kind of just like trying to defend a slightly passive position and making sure white doesn't get too much play. So that's the modus operandi early on in this type of structure. He's having a good little think here. I think he sees the issue with bishop e3, the knight g4 move. So I bet he's considering measures like h3 or maybe rook a3, but nope, he just goes ahead and plays this. Okay. So I'm probably going to continue with my plan, knight g4. Just seems like the best way of disturbing him. So if knight g4 and the bishop moves, maybe bishop g5. That attacks e7. So knight g4, bishop g5. I could play rook f e8, but then they'll play h3, knight f6, and probably drop the bishop back. And it's unclear what I've gained. Because I don't really want my rook on e8 in the future. So he might be very cleverly trying to induce knight g4. That's kind of what I'm thinking he's up to now. So trying to get me to play that move. Well, I can still play bishop b3 right now if I want. We have that option. And then they'd go to d3 or b1 to keep an eye on the e4 pawn. Maybe I should throw that in. Let's say bishop b3, queen d3. Maybe rook f d8. And is d5 dangerous? Trying to force my queen to part ways with my light square bishop. So bishop b3, queen d3, rook f d8, d5, queen b4. They have bishop d2 perhaps. I can come into c4. Also e4's a little weak. That might be all right. So I'm kind of rejecting my original plan, knight g4, just because this bishop g5 move looks like a good reply. I think knight g4, bishop g5, bishop takes d4 is out of the question. After knight takes d4, queen takes d4, bishop takes e7. White should be better there with the bishop pair, and I have weak dark squares. What about queen b3 too? So queen b3, queen takes b3, bishop takes b3. I'm threatening knight takes e4, but the thing I don't like about that position is that it looks pretty easy for him to kick this bishop out. Like rook a3 or something. So maybe that's not so good. So one more time. Bishop b3, queen d3. What then? I mean, maybe queen b4 right away in that position. But knight d2 is awkward. Attacking that bishop. Knight d2, I guess I can come back to e6. That might not be so bad. Okay, let's play this move. We've looked at a few lines. I don't think this bishop gets trapped on that square. It's possible it's going to get pushed back, but I don't see a trap per se. So I'm just going to play this and see how it goes. So if queen b4, I am hitting a4. It would make sense for him to defend by playing bishop d2, but then queen c4, looking for a trade. So queen b4, bishop d2, queen c4. Let's say we swap. So queen takes c4, bishop takes c4. I'm hitting the rook. Also, the e4 pawn's undefended, so rook e1 seems forced. Am I okay with that position? I'm probably still a bit worse, but I think it's fine. If I wait to play queen b4, he might play knight d2 or d5. Like, again, that d5 move is one I have to calculate. Perhaps I can get away with playing rook fd8 right now. Let's say rook fd8, and then regardless of how he attacks this bishop, either knight d2 or rook a3, maybe just bishop back to e6 then. And if rook fd8, d5, I have queen to b4, and I always have that queen c4 saving resource, as far as I can tell. All right, let's try that. Hope I'm not playing with fire in leaving this bishop somewhat marooned on the b3 square, but we'll find out. Another line is knight d2, bishop back to e6, and then d5, hitting my queen. But the thing is, he's not threatening the bishop there, because if my queen moves, like say queen b4, he can't take it. He's in a pin along the d file. So that variation ought to work out for me. Gotta watch the clock, because it's easy to spend time in positions that are kind of subtle like this, where you're trying to consider multiple ways your opponent can probe you, like knight d2 or rook a3 or d5. So you don't just want to sit there trying to refute each and every one of them, unless there's very serious danger. But here it always seems like I have a way to escape. So given the time control, I can't afford to spend too much time looking at each and every move white has available. I think rook fd8 is helpful in almost any circumstance, having the rook on the d file. I want to keep this rook guarding the a pawn for now. Also, if I had played rook a d8, I would essentially be saying that my rook on f8 would be good where it is or on the e file, which seems unlikely. So often when you're debating between two rook moves, you have to look at the other rook that you are not moving to a central file and ask yourself like where that is likely to become active. So in this case, I think this rook has a decent chance of being useful on the a file as it is now, protecting the a5 pawn, maybe on the c file in the future too. The other arrangement wasn't looking so great. I also had a game in this line against Tony Rotella, our good friend Tony, and that's in the 15-minute category too. Very similar position. As I recall, Tony established like two pawns in the middle like that, just like my opponent has. And I had some mild difficulties, I'd say, dealing with that central structure. Okay, so here we got to drop this back. And if d5, queen b4 was the calculation. I think d5, queen takes b2 would be a bit too bold. That just looks like a recipe for getting my queen trapped. Like, rook fb1 would nearly trap it there. I guess I can technically go to e5. But I wouldn't even think about taking on b2 in a long time control game. I'm certain there's a way for him to trap me there. Like knight c4, maybe taking away e5 with the queen on b2. That looks pretty good. So the plan is d5, queen b4 instead. I might go knight g4 now. Because if this knight is diverted from the d4 pawn, then knight g4, bishop g5 is just running into a capture on d4. And I can play rook takes d4 or bishop takes d4. Yeah, whereas previously I didn't have nearly enough firepower coming down on that pawn. Only enough for a trade. Okay, we got about a minute advantage here. Yeah, I think this game is going to be a time scramble. It's interesting the effect that a small increment has on the play. Like, let's say this were 15 plus, even something as low as like 15 plus 2 second increment. That can result in a situation where you will have to spend more time in the clutch because that 2 second increment almost ensures that you can't win on time. Like, you can't just flag your opponent in a position that's objectively losing for you. 2 second increment isn't much, but, or like a 15 plus 5. A 5 second increment is a lot. For a good player, they can afford to get in time pressure sometimes with an increment like that and still work their way out of it. That's why you see, like in the recent Sinquefield Cup, a lot of the players struggled with the time control because before move 40, there was no increment. So they were just playing essentially a sudden death time control, and they don't get that 30-second bonus per move. So if you recall the Caruana versus Carlsen game, it was just a time scramble. It was just a bullet game because they had to make something like, I don't know, maybe 14 moves. And I know Caruana was very low on time, like 14 moves in like 2 minutes or something like that. And it was just bang, bang, bang. No respite for either side. Magnus also got in very bad time pressure. And I agree with what the commentators were saying. I think those top players have been so accustomed to the 30-second increment that even they, the best players in the world, can fall victim to very poor time management in non-increment time controls. Okay, so h3, probably a smart move. He just rules out knight g4. So now I want to figure out a different way to attack this pawn. I could play like knight e8, trying to open up the bishop. d5 is still kind of a concern. But it always seems like I have queen b4 in that case. So maybe knight e8's all right. Like knight e8 and, you know, the knight coming to d6 is pretty useful too, I gotta say. So let's try that. We just double check that d5 doesn't run into anything. I don't think so. Yeah, let's do it. So if d5, queen b4, once again. So going to e8 is helpful because if black goes to d7, there's not a whole lot of other good squares it can jump to thereafter. I guess in this case, knight d7, I would be perhaps introducing the idea of knight e5 since there is a pin along the d file. But knight e8 to d6, that's a more useful square. We can work with a square like that. Okay, so he brings the knight back. Makes sense. Now, I could play queen b4 here if I want, looking to play bishop c4. Little cheapo threat. That could be okay. So maybe queen b4, let's say rook fc1, knight d6. Again, looking to play bishop c4. Could also play knight d6 right away, but then d5, and the d file is closed. So knight d6 might just be a blunder if I play it right away. I could play queen a6. Nah, I think I'm going to go for the most active move. He's under 5 minutes. Let's try to keep this like minute-and-a-half advantage we have right now. And he wants to play rook fc1 because if he plays rook ac1 to guard c4, he loses the a4 pawn. I do have to be cautious about knight g5. Almost makes me think I should throw in h6 somewhere, but I don't know that I want to spend the time to do that. So I think if rook fc1, probably knight d6. Which doesn't carry a threat per se, but it does help me access that c4 square. So maybe the game could go like rook fc1, knight d6, let's say knight g5, bishop c4, maybe queen c3, looking to swap queens. I take, they can take with a pawn or the rook. Let's say rook takes. Then they would be threatening e5, trying to kick my knight away from defending the bishop. Okay, I'm still going to do this, though. It just looks like the right thing to do. Yeah, could have played h6 like he's trying to do, stop a knight from coming into g5. But with the time situation, he's playing a little hesitantly, spending, 30 seconds at least per move here, probably even more the past few moves. So let's keep the pressure on, let's keep creating threats, and hopefully make him think. See, this is the type of thing I was alluding to earlier. Like, he just doesn't have the time to worry about stuff like bishop c4. Bishop c4, even if I play that move, it doesn't have a threat, really. I mean, I guess if his queen moves somewhere like d2 or something, maybe I can win the e4 pawn. But he simply doesn't have the time to sit there and try to hash out all the ramifications of my bishop coming in. Okay, so he prefers to just play knight d2 and guard that. Makes sense. Now, how to pressure him further? It's kind of hard. I can move the knight back again and try to attack d4. That's not a bad idea. But it's not a great idea either. At best, it's neutral. Thing is, if knight e8, I wonder if knight c4 can be played. They don't necessarily have to repeat. Taking this pawn is suicide. I won't do that. Rook fb1 traps the queen. I could do something radical like f5 right now. Just doesn't seem appropriate. f5, they play e5. Unless I could play bishop takes e5 then, that would be interesting. f5, e5, bishop takes e5, d takes e5, knight e4. Loading up on the d file. Maybe that's something. And then wherever they move the queen, I have knight takes d2 after that. Interesting. What about f5, d5? Is that a problem? Probably not. f5, d5, maybe bishop c5 is an issue then. But I can, after f5, d5, I can always take on e4 and just shatter their pawn structure and hit their queen. Yeah, let's try that. So taking decisive action. Again, creating threats, trying to force our opponent to think. They can take on f5, but then I get nice squares to work with. I can play knight takes f5, hit the bishop and the d4 pawn, unveil my rook. I could play bishop takes f5 and just attack their queen. Probably knight takes f5 stronger, though. I mean, it makes sense that I can get away with something like this, like pushing the f-pawn, because he's danced around with his knight a little bit. Knight back to d2, then to f3, and now back to d2 again. Okay, so he just plays a defensive move. Bishop f7 is possible. He's really buried his bishop now in doing this. If bishop f7, is d5 an issue? Trying to threaten that bishop c5 move. No, I always think I have play against that. Maybe I can play rook ac8 just to be safe, though. Like rook ac8, so if d5 take, I'd never run afoul of the bishop coming to c5. All right, it's a little slow, but let's do that. So we'll just guard against that threat, or perceived threat. I'm not going to take on e4 unless I get some direct benefit from it, because there's no reason to allow this bishop to become less obstructed on the diagonal. Moreover, if I take on e4, I do have an isolated e-pawn then. I think my best bet is probably to play bishop f7 and then go for e5. Looking to shatter his pawn formation that way, but First, let's get this rook involved in doing something. Yeah, he's just so low now. He's basically going to be playing a bullet game. I'm low too, but a minute 15 is unrecoverable practically in a position like this. Unless this guy plays like a perfect bullet game against me with less time. Yeah, rook a3. Okay, I can take here now if I want. Because then I'd be hitting... Oh, no, I can't. Take rook b1 still. Scratch that idea. Okay, let's just proceed with this move. I don't think this move really threatens anything, so we can just do this. If d5, maybe bishop takes b2 now, attacking both rooks. Yeah, e5 is coming. I want to pry open that d file. He offers a queen trade, okay. I can still play e5 here. I like the fact that if a queen trade happens, I get to take with a pawn and threaten his rook. So maybe e5 regardless. Or take and then e5, also possible. Some radical stuff here. So if I take, he takes the f-pawn. Bishop takes d4 is enabled. Okay, let's take once. Let's do that. Then we'll go e5. And if take, I'll take c3 and then play bishop takes e5. Hitting g3. Yeah, let's do that. Probably he should take with a pawn. Even though he has an open c-file for his rook, like pawn takes is best, but again, with the time situation, I'm not sure it even matters. Rook back. Okay, so he defends b2. This is hanging though, isn't it? I guess he has bishop b6 and then takes a5. So I could address that if I want. So take g3, bishop b6, rook e8, let's say, bishop takes a5. e4 is kind of weak. You know what I'm going to do, though? This is a weird-looking move, but I'm just going to stop the whole bishop b6 plan. And he has no time. And he dropped the knight. Yeah, just no time. I still wanted to try to play a good move there at the end, but pretty clearly his only idea here was to play bishop to b6 and attempt to go after the a5 pawn. Okay, so yeah, poor time management from white. Just caught up to him in the end. Let's take a look at it. So castle. So in this line, white temporarily goes down a pawn. This was a trendy line several years back, and it still gets played a lot from the white side. Because basically it's been established that white stands a very good chance of winning the pawn back, and black can try to keep the c4 pawn by means of, sometimes even black will play the queen up to d5 to support it if white attacks it. Like for instance, in the game continuation, after this, I played g6 and just got on with my development. But if I wanted to, I could try queen d5. This is another line looking to support the pawn, although you do walk into discoveries. But I just prefer to give the pawn back and play simply. So the other possibility was, like, after knight b6, they could just play knight a3, and there's an analogous line that goes like this. Here, queen c2 here. And I sort of feel like this is the better version of it for white, because again, knight d5 to b4 is not possible. So the inclusion of a4, a5, in my experience, seems to benefit black more than white. So this all occurred. I do recall, as I was saying, one game where queen h4 was played. I don't think that was the Friedel game, though. I think it was a different game I played online. Possibly a 15-minute game. So bishop g7. If you search my channel for Anti-Slav, sometimes this line is called the Anti-Slav, you may find some games in this. So e4, I'm going to turn the engine on right here because I'm just curious what it's going to suggest. It likes knight g4, that's kind of weird looking. So is that to try to get in knight e5 and maybe stare at that d3 square a little bit? So if d4, we're going to take the pawn, I guess is the plan. Knight g4 looks very awkward and sort of a bizarre move. Not the type of move a human would play, unless they had a specific idea in mind or had looked at it previously with an engine. Queen b6 is interesting. I think it's okay. The computer does claim a small edge for white now, though. d4, bishop e3. Yeah, so originally I thought I could play knight g4 without any consequence here, but after bishop g5, it's annoying to defend this pawn. Yeah, the engine says I'm best off just going back to f6. So I figured I might want to wait on the whole knight g4 move. So I played bishop b3. He instantly played queen d3, and I went here. So time-wise, as I was discussing, I don't think this bishop becomes trapped. So in a longer game, I might have a response prepared for like all these moves, but I just looked at a few variations, and it always seems like I can get back. Again, d5, I can play queen b4 and queen c4 or bishop c4 potentially. So it's kind of a judgment call. Like once you reach a certain level of comfort in your head and time is an issue, you sort of just have to go with your gut, you know, and resist the temptation to calculate everything. So he played knight d2. That might be a weak move. Probably in the coming few moves, his knight was just better off staying on f3. Yeah, rook a3 is the suggested improvement. Bishop e6, knight g5. Okay. Yeah. And then I might have to go all the way back to c8. I think black still retains a solid position, but I would rather be white now. So knight d2, bishop back to e6, h3, just prophylaxis against knight g4. And now we played this maneuver, knight e8. So if I come to d7, I just don't have anywhere to go thereafter. I think these squares, maybe there's a chance I can get in knight e5 when they're pinned, but actually I can't even do it right now if I had another move, because they could take, and my queen would be under attack on b6. So knight e8 is the better way to go about maneuvering this knight and opening the dark square bishop. Queen b4 is helpful, so once the knight returned here, c4 is a newly weakened square. Yeah, and he's just spending too long on natural moves. He has 4 minutes, 30 seconds. He spent a full minute playing rook fc1, and I mean, that move is almost forced. I don't really see any other decent moves for him, because he can't play rook ac1, he loses the a-pawn. He can't play b3. Well, maybe he could play b3, but rook fc1 is just a natural way to defend the square and activate the rook. So he has to play that move faster. Knight d6, you can see the eval, it's roughly level. Now, another minute being spent on knight d2, f5. I do run into players like this sometimes in the 15-minute pool. I distinctly remember probably a half dozen games where my opponents is just like their clock is ticking down, and it's clear they're trying to play too careful, and they're just not going to have enough time. And then they suddenly find themselves with a minute left and maybe an interesting position on the board, but no way to do anything with it. Yeah, and he started making some mistakes here. Time is a big factor. If e5 in this position, I was thinking bishop takes. Idea here, knight e4, but I wonder if it doesn't work. It works with the queen moves, because if the queen moves, let's say, to e2, then I can take, and I'm up a pawn. But, yeah, I didn't see this move, bishop takes e4, sacrificing the queen. Rook takes d3, bishop takes d3, and white has, what, a rook plus 2 minor pieces for the queen? So not enough for me as black. I can play rook d8. I might have some temporary play, but... Okay, so if e5, I might have stopped to think about that and maybe come up with something else. Computer says f4. That's a cool move. Attacking the bishop and trying to get the knight to f5. So if gf, then knight f5. This bishop is now out of play, though. That's the problem if I let this pawn sit on e5. But I think under the circumstances, f5 is a good move, giving him a lot to think about when he has dwindling time. So he just played sort of a move that reinforces e4. So here I could have played knight f7, attacking d4 multiple times. Why didn't I consider that? I think, well, I mean, maybe I looked at that. I can't recall, even though it was just a moment ago. This idea was a little concerning to me, but maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's nothing to be worried about. D takes e4, so I can even give up the queen on the b4 square because I have counterplay against their queen.
Check.
Queen takes d8. Rook takes d8. So take, just a takes. And for the moment, it's equal material. I have a minor piece plus 2 extra pawns, but the computer says it's over because I'm attacking d2 and also b2. And his position is pretty awful looking. So I agree with that evaluation. But instead, I played rook a c8, just making sure that if d5 take, my rook will be assisting in the defense of c5. He played rook a3. Yeah, very possible I didn't play this the best way. So here, f takes e4, f takes e4, c5 is good. The engine really likes this. So if take, I assume bishop takes b2. Okay, I was looking at knight discoveries again, like knight c4 or something, opening up the attack on the queen. But nope, bishop takes b2, hitting both rooks is even better. And I'm +7. Yeah. Okay. So c5 looking to pry open the a1, h8 diagonal would have been very strong here. If d5 is it the same thing? Bishop takes b2. Oh, now they can play rook b3. Okay, because my bishop is not covering that square. So if d5, I have c4, though. And then take on b2. Again with the bishop. Right, and there's no rook b3. The pawn covers it now. Well, I definitely wanted to explode the center, and I thought mainly I was going to try to do it with the e-pawn, but I can see that the c-pawn also is a valuable asset in taking down white's d4 square. So I played bishop f7. He went for a queen trade, or offered a queen trade with queen c3. Now I did this e5 plan. Again, c5 looks very good. And if queen takes b4, a takes b4, his rook doesn't have a lot of squares to work with. If rook d3, he gets trapped after c4. The rook is very clumsy. No good squares. So after the capture, he'd have to go back here, and I assume just taking this pawn is excellent for black. Yeah, we're doing awesome. Up a pawn, and our bishops are probably better than his bishops. b2 is still weak. Maybe we can go d3. I played e5. They took. We traded. Bishop takes. And now they got the rook out of the way. So, yeah, here, the time situation virtually guarantees a win for black with just normal play. But I played knight e8 just to react to the bishop b6 idea. Maybe I can just take here. And if here, rook e8, bishop takes a5, rook a8. Ah, yeah. Attack the bishop, and if the bishop moves, we get a4. And if b4, this bishop's kind of walled in on that square. Bishop e5, and black is much better according to the engine. Yeah, I agree. White's coordination is, yeah, not not an attractive sight. His lack of coordination. So I play knight e8 here, bishop back. I figured if we swapped bishops, that would be somewhat better. Yeah, and then he just blundered a piece, but pretty nice position for black regardless, because he's got the isolated e-pawn, and there's not too much for him to attack. My a5 pawn's a bit weak, but how does he go about attacking it? It's tough. He went for it right away and dropped the knight. So, hate to see the game largely decided by time pressure, but I think the play was interesting nonetheless. Yeah, these non-increment games, you just got to manage your time, and you can't start tilting at windmills and trying to counter every single threat that your opponent throws at you, which I get the impression he was trying to do, because you just can't get away with that. If it was a 30-second increment, yeah, you can get away with that. But these sudden death, no increment time controls, beware. So thank you guys for watching. I'll be back tomorrow with another video. Talk to you guys later. Bye.